Join me on an inspiring journey through the world of fitness, health, and performance with the Genetic Coach, where I delve deep into the genetic foundations of athletic endurance, discovering how genetics is revolutionizing our understanding of human potential and how we can unlock our full athletic capabilities through a fresh perspective on conventional practices. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of The Genetic Coach, where we explore the world of genetics and sports performance. I'm joined today by registered dietitian nutritionist Sarah Amidon, specializes in chronic health conditions and sports performance, utilizing targeted evidence-based testing, counseling, and nutrition strategies. Sarah has a compelling personal story that ignited her passion for genetic testing, and today she is going to share with us some of her insights and experiences that will shed further light on this world of genetic testing for health, performance, and well-being. So welcome, Sarah, and I'm so grateful for your time with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
Looking forward to it. Let's start off, as I do with most of my guests. I like to just find out a little bit of their backstory and their background. And I know you've got a very personal story as to what got you into this sort of line of work in this industry and where your passion comes from. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm excited to share a little bit of my story. I hear on and on again, just like how compelling, as you mentioned, that is to start as a patient first, an athlete first, and now a clinician. I've been playing sports my whole life. A lot of the girls would be out, playing Barbies or doing pretend, and I was out shooting hoops and playing basketball in my front yard. And I just really enjoy movement over kind of that sedentary or I'm not one who will sit and read a book all day. I'm one who just wants to be moving, and it always feels so productive for me. But I started out in softball and basketball, and I credit 7 years of dance lessons to having any kind of coordination with my 6 foot frame. So it's it's really great to grow up in an environment where you can play multiple sports. And I think that that's starting to get a little bit lost on our current society and culture, where we specialize really early. And I
Mm.
know for you as a sports scientist, just seeing how many injuries happen as a result of that, and it just puts and highlights the importance of the genetics piece
Mm.
really from the get-go to prevent injury when we see those elevated risks. But yeah, my undergrad I did in communications, and I got a minor in psychology. So if you can't communicate a message, it doesn't really matter what you have to say. So I've been really thankful for that background. So then I went back to school to be a dietitian and specialize in genomics specifically in 2018 after my own failing health. And really the only way that could be explained was through genetic testing and the kind of gene expression that happened for me. Had Epstein-Barr virus as part of my story since I was about 5. I had mono when I was 7. And what 7-year-old do you know that gets mono? You usually associate that with college students or high stress.
Mm.
So that felt a little bit strange. And then in recent years, I also tested positive for Lyme disease. And so lots of chronic fatigue has been kind of weaved in and out of my story, but sports really has kept me grounded, and I feel really good when I'm jumping. And volleyball has become my primary sport. I played Division 1 volleyball at Indiana State University for 4 years, and I've never really stopped. I coached at Western Illinois for a year, was the graduate assistant, coached juniors. So volleyball really, I think from 7th or 8th grade on has just always stuck with me. I enjoy the jumping part of it. I enjoy the non-contact, which reduces a lot of injury risk as well. But yeah, seeing my own DNA results from my very first test in 2016, I think my mind was blown as to the possibilities to be able to help patients like myself who are just struggling with chronic health conditions. So I immediately thought, why aren't we doing this? Why isn't this like the normal standard of care for patients? And then as a former athlete, I immediately thought, wow, we could use this for sport. I wish I'd had this 20 years ago, because I, would run the same sprints and do the same workouts as my teammates. And I felt like even though I wasn't out partying and I wasn't, I always ate really well, I felt like they were doing fine, and I'm like doubled over and like asking for more time to recover between sprints. And
Yeah.
that always confused me, like if I'm doing everything right, but I'm still struggling. Why is that the case? So I feel like the genetics component has just been such a mind-blowing experience for me, and to read every research paper that comes out and to learn more and more information, because when I saw my first report I was like, okay, show me every homozygous gene I have and I'm going to focus on those first,
Mm.
and just try to understand. So no one was like, showing me what they did or how things worked. I just had a natural curiosity there where I dug into the papers and was like, okay, who's doing this? There's got to be people in this world who are practicing this approach.
Mm.
So I stumbled on Amanda Archibald, who's now my mentor, registered dietitian, and she's been in the field for many years. And I was like, okay, I want to be like her when I grow up. So we talk regularly. I talked to her yesterday. So she's been so gracious to kind of take me under her wing, and her genomics courses have been wonderful, to kind of help others get up to speed on some of those things. So I did 4.5 years of grad school along with prerequisites, with two small kids at home during a pandemic, to do what I do now. And this clear vision to practice it for the patient, but also the athlete, is really what has kept me going for the last couple of years.
Too. A lot in that story. But what I picked up in your personal story when you told it to me is that the traditional medical approach, so if we're talking not specifically sports performance at the moment, but if we're just talking general health, the traditional medical approach wasn't working for you. You were not getting the answers that you were looking for, and you weren't making any progress. So how does genetic testing compare with traditional medicine, and how do you see that playing out in the future?
Yeah, I think having been a patient first and now a clinician, I saw firsthand what the insights of genetic testing did for me. No one could tell me why I was having cramping for 4 hours every time I ate, or why these symptoms started about 3 months postpartum after I had my first baby and then had my gallbladder removed. And then I had my second baby and had the same symptoms, except I didn't have an organ to remove to fix it. So it was like, well, now what do I do? And even when I went to have, gallbladder surgery, or was considering it, they were like, well, it might help, it might not. And I'm like, you guys are the experts here. You tell me. I don't know anything about the human anatomy, the physiology, the mechanisms by which, we digest our food. So I think I've just had so much frustration with not knowing why things are happening. So, and something about the postpartum stuff, where I gained like 60 pounds with my first, and I'm a tall person, that makes sense. Gained 50 pounds with my second, but lost it really quickly, not on purpose. But there's something about, all that adipose tissue getting flushed through the liver, maybe turning that bile into sludge, and, it just slowing everything down a lot. I don't really have a good answer for that still, but even just having the GI issues, and after my second child, all my, friends and family are like, well, you need to go see a GI specialist. And this whole time I'm like, I've been to so many emergency rooms, and like they're scratching their heads and don't know what to do with me. And they apologize, they don't have an answer for me. So, I go to see a GI specialist who didn't do a physical exam, didn't do any lab work, said I had IBS and here's a medication. He handed me samples for something he said I would be on for the rest of my life. And I said, so you're telling me there's nothing I can do with my diet to improve my situation? And he said no.
Wow.
And so it was exactly what I thought it would be,
Mm.
and I'm not saying that all GI specialists are like this, because they're not. And I've met some who are incredible, and they're using amazing therapies to help patients with IBS. But in this particular situation, I knew that this was not the way for me. I've always been really sensitive to medications. Threw the samples in the trash, walked out the door, and found a better way. I think we get so disconnected as healthcare practitioners from biochemistry, and we really need to remember that it's the heartbeat of everything we do. And that is the difference between applying a genetics and genomics approach versus a more conventional approach, is go back to the genomics, ignore the diagnosis essentially, and just go, where's the hiccup? Where is the speed bump? How can we make a way around it? How can we optimize or support an enzyme that maybe is lacking? And do we have the cofactors to do it? Super challenging. And I know that the face of healthcare is changing, and I'm so grateful for that. The unfortunate part is that most of it is not covered by insurance.
Yeah.
And so patients are left with a lot of challenges financially to be able to actually find the care that they need.
Very interesting. And you're an athlete yourself, and so you started looking at your body, but you started looking at it from a holistic point of view in terms of your health issues and the challenges that you were experiencing. But that, obviously rectifying that side of things has a knock-on effect to your sporting performance as well. Testing for genetics in terms of the sporting performance world is not only about knowing what kind of activities will I do best, incorporating into my training regime, what should I do to recover, etc., etc. But it's looking at the whole system and potential other hurdles that you speak about that may be impacting sporting performance at the end of the day. And I think that's what I love about your approach is that, your interest is lying with your sports people, but it's not sort of tunnel vision and just looking at the activity side of things. You very much focused on the other systems that all contribute to performance at the end of the day. I'd love you to talk us through maybe a case study, a real life case study that you've had where there have been issues outside of the sporting or the physical performance realm that actually help the athlete perform better in their sport.
Yeah, I had to really think about this because I've had a number of really cool stories. And this is an approach that I've been testing out for about 18 months. I knew that it would help. I just didn't know to what degree. So I started out in my own sport of volleyball and beach volleyball by sponsoring some professional athletes. So for beach volleyball, there's not a lot of money to be made. You're only relying you and your partner. There's no, paycheck that's coming regardless of your play or not. So it's a very cutthroat sport. And these athletes are playing anywhere from 1 to 4 matches per day, 2 to 3 days in a row. And so there are definitely tournaments, especially on our domestic tour, where these athletes are exhausted and they may not even have time to recover before, oh, this court ran late. You have to now play back to back where you just stepped off the court, have 15 minutes, and you're back up again.
Yeah.
And so there really isn't a lot of time to recover, to even focus on recovery. It's like, I got to eat a quick snack. I got to, hydrate. So these beach volleyball players were super eager to take advantage of my sponsorship. So we were using the 3x4 Genetics DNA blueprint for that. And one athlete in particular came to me, and knowing ahead of time that he had said he had low B12, low vitamin D, despite never wearing sunscreen. And that I found super interesting because I've had a couple of beach volleyball players tell me that they have low vitamin D. Well, how does that happen when you play an outdoor sport? And
Yeah.
I want, if you hear nothing else from me today, hear this. It doesn't matter how much you're outside. You have to pay attention to vitamin D, and you also need to go back and look at your DNA results, because you could have all the sun exposure in the world, but what's disrupting the metabolism of those nutrients? So this athlete also happened to have elevated mercury levels. So then we go, oh, well, that's super interesting. That is absolutely a disruptor of metabolism. We know what road that could lead down with all kinds of problems, but that is the first thing that I was like, oh, I got to see your genes. Like, so these are the things he came to me with, but he really also wanted a more personalized approach to, well, what supplements should I even be taking? We hear lots of influencers out there like, this is going to help your performance, this is going to help your performance. And I think he just felt clouded by all of the information out there. He's like, but what's best for me? What, I think the most return on your investment for what you're spending on a
Mm.
supplement. So we got his DNA blueprint results back, and detoxification was number one and for his cellular pathways. And so you're like, oh, there it is. He had high needs for B12, high needs for vitamin D, and detoxification issues. So right away, those were the areas that we were going to focus on. And he also didn't realize that it wasn't normal to have a bowel movement every day. And so that was like job number one. It was something he would joke about with friends and be like, no one poops every day. We're like, yeah, you do, you should. So if we're not pooping every day, how are we detoxifying? We're going to reabsorb anything and those, metabolites back through the digestive lining. And so getting into poop every day, we did that. And then some of the results that he was having, he said, well, my sleep has been amazing. That wasn't even a complaint that he had when he came to me. He wasn't saying I'm not sleeping well, but to go from I'm sleeping fine, not a complaint, to my sleep is amazing. And then he had said in the last year or so, he was having issues remembering the score or whose serve it was, and that had returned. And that wasn't even a complaint that he had, was maybe lack of focus or cognition or memory. But if we've got mercury, floating around, we're not detoxifying well. I could see that happening too. So those were two things that he mentioned after the fact that weren't even a complaint when he came to me. And so it was just kind of like, what supplement should I be taking? Why do I have low vitamin D? Why do I have low B12? And then the mercury levels. And so just by supporting detoxification, things at the cellular level, we're going to see things happen in that sports performance and recovery. So that's been really cool to watch happen in real time and to hear that kind of feedback, because I think for any athletes or fitness people who are listening in, are there things that you didn't even know could be better
Exactly. I was
that
just about to
have
say.
just been that have just been okay, or no real complaints there?
Mm.
But like, what if you've had low lying, chronic pain this whole time? What if your memory or cognition and focus could be better? What if your sleep could be amazing? And so I think that has been really exciting to watch as a clinician. And I know all of my colleagues who practice genomics here, get these stories every day of, people are like, wow, I didn't know this could be better. And, my hair is great, my skin is glowing. And so maybe you have cool stories like that too, that you've also seen. But I think for this particular athlete, the sky's the limit. Once we remove the barriers to cellular healing, we're only going to improve performance.
Yeah.
Is really the summary there.
Absolutely. What I have found is with athletes, and I guess this is people in general really, is that we are creatures of habit. And, we in this routine that we know well and we do all the time. And then we get a set of results and we get a whole bunch of new recommendations now. And it's not just one or two recommendations. Often it can be quite a few recommendations that are laid out for you. And how do you get athletes to take on that information to really make the change that's necessary in their routines and to stick with it, not to revert back to old habits, and really, I guess if people are seeing a big difference, they're going to want to carry on with the recommendations. But I often have athletes who can't sort of sift through, well, what is my most important thing that I should do in action to get the best result? That's obviously part of your job or your work that you do with athletes is refining the information and really pointing out the most critical areas to make those changes. But how do you get athletes to actually change their habits and to take on what you're recommending?
Such a great question. And I know sports dietitian colleagues of mine have expressed concern even going into the genomic side of things, because they're like, I can't even get my athlete to focus on meal timing, to eat breakfast in the morning, get their recovery, protein in. That's some of the pushback that I've gotten from sports dietitians, and understandably so, is just, I can't even get my athlete to do X, Y, or Z. But we also know in the medical research that personalized recommendations are going to have more compliance than a conventional, generalized recommendation. And we know a step further that DNA personalized recommendations are even more so. We see more compliance with that than we do with even a personalized. When people see their DNA blueprint, they go, oh, wow, this is me. And they realize what could happen if they don't do what I'm asking, or what their, genomics specialist practitioner is asking. And so I know that was true for me, and it's been true for basically all of my clients, regardless if it's a chronic health issue or an athlete, because I mean, athletes are already highly motivated as it is. They want to be the best. They're competitive, so that's in their favor to be an athlete. And also, once they kind of understand how their family health history fits into their bigger picture, do they have, cognitive decline or cancer that runs in their family? And they go, okay, well, I want to know this for my sport, but I also would love to know how to have good longevity, how to have good quality of life later in life, because eventually you're going to retire. This is not the long-term plan for you to be a
Yeah.
pro athlete. Though you can, some people still compete long into their 70s and 80s, and I love that. I hope to do that myself.
Yes.
But yeah, I think just encouraging them that this is really specific to them increases compliance for certain, and then encouraging, other sports dietitians and practitioners who do work with athletes that, hey, you guys can see these results too. So I'm very excited to continue on in mentoring sports dietitians to do this with their own athletes and teams, because I'm only one person and we've got thousands of athletes in the United States alone. We've got, thousands of teams over dozens of sports just at the university level. And there's no better time to be coming into this field than right now. So my biggest excitement, honestly, is to bring performance athletic sports dietitians into the forefront for sports performance using genomics, because I think we've kind of cast them off to the side and go, well, anyone can do that. Anyone can, do meal timing and hydration education and that kind of thing. And I really want to put sports dietitians back in the driver's seat to be able to work with and command that space in a way that can't even be touched, really. But yeah, I think encouraging athletes that they can prevent injury, which means they have more opportunity for winnings and better finishes and reaching that Olympic goal, but also to get those sponsorships that maybe they've wanted. If you've wanted to be sponsored by, some of these apparel companies and get big checks written, we really only can do that if we get noticed, and we get
Mhm.
noticed when we perform well and cover well. I have a framework for my course, The Genomic Edge, that we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's called the Pillars of Precision Sports Performance. So we talk about eating for your genes, training for your genes, supplementing for your genes, but also that injury prevention, winning over the inflammation game, because who recovers fastest wins, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who can make that sprint down the basketball court to run that layup and then do it again and get back on
Exactly.
defense and do it again.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
And you talk a lot about education. And I mean, this is a fairly new field. I think you've alluded to that. And I love the fact that you are out there promoting education of the subject and facilitating, enabling other practitioners to use this type of information to make a difference in people's lives. How do you see? I've had some athletes who have been a little reluctant when it comes to genetic testing and not really knowing exactly what it's all about, and are you going to find something that's really wrong with me and is going to give me a predicament where I can't change my genes? What do I do with the information then? How do you deal and educate around that aspect of testing?
That's such a great question. I've actually encountered that with a few athletes. I had one that I was going to be working with coming up to their Olympic debut, and she put a pause on it and she said, I think the burden of information is going to be too much for me, and I'm going to focus on my mental game coming into the Olympic Games. And I said, that is totally fair. I think choosing when we are ready to hear and receive that information, and more importantly, what are we going to do about it?
Yes.
Because if we just drop a bucket of information on someone, especially someone who's prone to anxiety, right? They're
Yeah.
just gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. And my family has a history of Alzheimer's. My grandmother passed at age 70 from Alzheimer's. And I remember, years ago, being asked, if you could find out if you had the Alzheimer's gene, would you want to know? And I was like, absolutely not. And now with the training that I've had, and we test, APOE, the E3, E2, E3, E4. E4 is the risk allele. That's epigenetic. That's not genetic. And I think that that is a huge misconception in the media, is that once you hear that you've got this gene or that gene, that it's genetic. And it's like, were you born with it? Were you born with that condition that's associated with that gene? No, then that's epigenetic, which means, yes, you can do something about that. So I think making that distinction between what's genetic and what's epigenetic and associated with gene expression based on our nutrition, our lifestyle, our stress, our toxic exposures is huge. So sending people to genetic counseling for having one APOE4 allele or even two, which is super rare, are they actually getting the information to empower them, as opposed to, well, here's just the information about what could happen, what symptoms to look out for, what kind of testing to look out for? Because on our end, when we see that, it's like, what are your lipids doing? What's your thyroid doing? What's your vitamin D look like? What are your toxic exposures? How's your stress? Are you sleeping? Those are all, factors that roll up into memory and cognitive care. And you can absolutely do stuff about that.
So maybe you can
I
just
know I went off.
pause there for a minute and just
I know I went off in the weeds a little bit.
explain epigenetics. Maybe just briefly for our listeners that don't know what that means.
Yeah, the epigenetic side of things. So we've got genetics, our set of genetic makeup, but the epigenetics is how does our body respond to the environment around us? We're taking in information all the time from the environment, whether that's in our food, whether that's our stress, our sleep, are we exposed to toxic chemicals or, something in our water, and our body responds by what proteins it makes, how the genes express in one way or another. And we want beneficial genes to turn on, and we want less beneficial genes to calm down or silence or turn off. So that's the side of things where, 5-6 years ago, I was 30 pounds lighter than I am now, very, very sickly. And we were able to understand that B vitamin metabolism wasn't great for me, needed to address sleep. When you got infants and toddlers at home, you're not sleeping very well. Stress management, how am I nourishing my body to then be able to heal and recover? So I think as far as athletes are concerned, most of the time we don't even have to talk about the fitness side or the endurance side or, the power side as far as preventing disease. But it's the overtraining side that we might have an issue with, where we've gone too far the other way. We have so much oxidative stress that now we have to back down off the ledge. And that is how we can manipulate gene expression in the other direction to support athletes. So I work with both, chronic illness and for athletes. So I see both sides of it, where it's like, we just want to get you moving, for the chronic illness patient, and the athlete, we're like, you need to take a day off. So
which is some of the hardest things to get an athlete to do. I mean, to take a rest day or to have more recovery. I mean, that is always the most difficult thing for an athlete to get their head around. But yeah, I see it in the work that I do, that's, so often where the problem lies.
To bring it back to the question, those who are reluctant to get genetic testing done, if you're not ready to hear the information, that's okay. And maybe speak to someone, if you're thinking about it, about why you should do it. There's also plenty of things that we don't know. So if you're just a curious person, you would enjoy it. But if you're reluctant, either due to privacy issues or the burden of information, that's okay. That's totally understandable. But I would encourage any clinician that is using genomics in their practice, especially for athletes, to make sure that they're giving them tangible things to do about their DNA blueprint results. Because I know that there was one story that I'd heard about an endurance athlete, marathon runner, who went to a practice that was using genetic testing, and because she was carbohydrate sensitive, she should take it easy on carbohydrates. And then, not surprisingly, the sports dietitian that was telling this story said that she had fatigue and low energy and poor recovery. And I was like, in this instance, I would personally never recommend an endurance athlete, even if they were, carbohydrate sensitive, to avoid carbohydrates.
Yeah.
That we have to look at it holistically and take all of the information in to then apply that according to their sport and their needs. We can't just go, this is what this says, so you need to do this. It's like, but what's the context?
Mm.
We have to understand the context for the athlete and their needs. I totally understand, the pushback and like, well, we're giving wrong recommendations, and we got to
Mm.
be really careful with that, because especially for an endurance athlete, if we're not eating enough carbs, we're in trouble.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. And that's always my driving force behind what I do is context is everything. And really understanding the individual from all perspectives, and that makes a massive difference to the type of recommendations, and really just making the recommendations practical at the end of the day, because if they are something that's out of reach or unreasonable, I think it's fair to say that someone is not going to take that on and onboard it. Such a big part of this whole genetic testing world. So now I know you did mention earlier about your genomic edge course that you are launching very soon, and you've put a lot of effort and hard work into it, and I'd love you just to talk us through it and tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. It's been part of my plan since the very beginning, is how can I equip athletes to use their DNA blueprint, and knowing that I'm only one person and I can only do DNA consultations so many hours per week, and then I've hit my ceiling. So I was like, I'm going to have to scale this so that I can free myself up to do other things. So I created this program called the Genomic Edge, and I talked about my pillars of precision sports performance, that framework for why you could incorporate genetics into your athletic journey, but trying to help athletes optimize their performance and recovery using their 3x4 genetics DNA blueprint specifically. So partnering with 3x4, partnering with GeneFit. This is an athlete-led program. So there's a workbook and a set of video modules that are recorded by me. So the athlete can purchase their 3x4 genetics test on their own and then go through the program kind of with those things side by side. And then they can have an optional add-on DNA consultation with me if they would like to dig a little bit more specific into recommendations outside of the workbook. Because obviously this is like me imagining I'm not ever going to see your DNA blueprint. But once I start saying some of similar things athlete to athlete, depending on what's going on, it's like, okay, in this scenario, this is what I would say. In this scenario, let's say you've got elevated needs for vitamin D and bone health risk. Hey, let's have a DEXA scan done let's just see what your baseline, bone mineral density is so that we can prevent injury down the line. Or if you have low vitamin D, let's try and get that back to what it needs to be so that we can prevent injury down the line for you as well, just as an example. But really, I think what sets me apart, what sets 3x4 apart from some other athletic DNA testing companies, is that we still use the cellular pathways. That is the key. Because you could tell an athlete all about what type of sport they should play or what they're, best at. But most of the time, at least at the level where I'll start working with them, it's going to be you're in high school, looking at playing in college, or you're a professional. You know what kind of athlete you are. But maybe you just need little nuanced things like, is caffeine good for me to use for my sport? Would I benefit from creatine? Are there other nutrients that I might have a higher need for because I have oxidative stress issues, or detoxification is a little bit slower for me? But I think what I loved about the 3x4 report in the, activity area was like high recovery needs. And I think when you see that purple or fuchsia for recovery, meaning it's a high impact or very high impact, you have to pay attention to this. That's me on my report. So seeing that, I was like, this is why I've struggled, as an athlete, is to recover from those sprints, recover from a long rally or what have you. It's why I don't play volleyball 2 days in a row. And I take my recovery days very seriously. And so when I can show an athlete that and go, you cannot afford to play 2 and 3 days in a row with, 2 to 4 matches a day and then still work out on Monday. Like
Mm.
that is your recovery day, maybe even Tuesday. Encouraging athletes to heed those recommendations and utilizing their DNA blueprint to do that. So the Genomic Edge, I wanted to make it accessible, tangible, and affordable for anyone to be able to come in and do. The program is $297, includes a sports nutrition foundations from my colleague and good friend, Lindsay Langford, and she's worked with the Olympic sport women's national team for soccer for a number of years. And so she is also working with the Cincinnati Bengals right now. So she provides kind of that basic sports nutrition pieces with hydration, your pre and post fueling, some supplementation, things like that, as an intro to the course. So while you're waiting for your DNA blueprint results to come in, you can go through Lindsay's part of the program. If you've never seen a sports dietitian before, you've never been introduced to some of those conventional approaches to sports nutrition. So I think that has a huge value too, especially for high school and college athletes who maybe have never thought about nutrition as even being a component to their performance. So I love that they have something to do while they're waiting for their DNA blueprint results to come in, and so much value there to then build upon that. Once their DNA blueprint results come in, they can work on their workbook and then pick the modules that are highest impact for them. There's a lot of information in there. I'll be very upfront with that, but I want athletes to focus on the modules that have the highest impact for them. They can always come back and listen to the other ones, but I don't want them to have that burden of information. Otherwise, they can just go through the workbook and kind of skip through the modules altogether if they're just like, okay, just let me know what I need to do. So I'm really excited about this, and I'm open to feedback when you guys finish it, and trying to always cue and tweak and try to make things a little bit better for the user.
Yeah. No, it's very exciting. I mean, I've already started working through it myself, and I think, like you say, it's one of the great things about the 3x4 test is that it does highlight your focus areas. So it does refine that information down somewhat into where you should be really, yeah, looking to make a difference. And, like you say, with your course, you can go directly to those modules and get the information that you're looking for, and start immediately with implementing the recommendations that are made. It's really exciting that you are making that available to people to start educating themselves, because I think that's a big part of this whole story is educating the user. So that's really exciting. And something that I just want to highlight here is that 3x4, once you've had the blueprint done, it's very easy to then link your results to GeneFit. And I know we spoke a little bit about GeneFit earlier, didn't we? And GeneFit being a product that's really focused on the genetics that's related to sports performance, as opposed to the 3x4 product blueprint, which is a little bit more broader in terms of the different systems that it looks at. I know you've had a look at GeneFit, and you've had some experience making use of it, and maybe you can just give us a quick overview of how that relates to sports performance.
Yeah, I'm excited about the wearable technology that is coming out now. And GeneFit, you guys have been using it with some of the professional soccer leagues, especially with Daniel's work, Daniel Guzman, which he's amazing. But yeah, for athletes who want the yes and, like, they've got their nutrition kind of shored up, they're interested in incorporating genomics and more targeted nutrition and supplement and lifestyle recommendations, GeneFit is kind of that yes and product, where it's kind of like, oh, this is something that I can use with my Garmin or my Apple Watch, turn on the activity when I'm doing some kind of training or fitness exercise, and then the information is computed through their algorithm to then give you feedback. What is the muscle scores, what are your connective tissue scores? Because if you have, let's say, high oxidative stress and it's taking your DNA into account, maybe those recovery days it's going to pop up like, hey, you should probably take today off. Your connective tissue scores are a little bit lower after that workout. So I love that feedback in real time. I think that's such a really beneficial feature for those who are training regularly at the college or professional level, to prevent injury. And then they also give you some nutrition recommendations in real time based on your genetics. Like, hey, support methylation today by, grabbing these folate rich foods, or, a little bit extra choline today, or you've got oxidative stress here, eat these colorful, pomegranate or your tart cherry today for recovery. So I think that those are really helpful prompts for athletes who are just like, oh, that's right, I got to do that thing. Because honestly, athletes are like, okay, I'm very scheduled. I've got my workout. I've got this interview. I've got, a lifting session later. I've got to eat. So they're very regimented. And so to have that little prompt to go, oh, that's right. Miss Sarah told me that I needed to add this to my diet. So helpful to have GeneFit to remind me of that. So I think it's a really cool product, and I'm excited for it to get adopted by more and more sports and more athletes, and for that wearable technology to continue to grow.
Very exciting. So we have we've got a promotion that we have partnered with Sarah. Anyone who signs up for her Genomic Edge course will be eligible to give GeneFit a try for free for 3 months worth, to essentially have their genetics linked to the product, to get real-time information back in terms of your training data and how that's impacting your body in terms of your genetics. And it really is roadmap, I guess, each and every day of what you should be eating, or how you should, what recovery strategies you maybe should be considering relative to the fitness scores and metrics that are coming out of GeneFit. A very exciting partnership. Look forward to hearing the feedback from athletes. And it's not necessarily only for elite athletes, right? It can be across the board, from anybody who has a simple training regime that may be getting out for a walk for 3 days a week or 4 days a week, right to your athlete operating at the pinnacle of their sport. So it really is for everyone. It's just such an exciting field, as you've mentioned. We just look forward to the partnership. Sarah, maybe you can just give us some information as to where people can find you, where they can follow you, where they can get in touch, and where they can find your Genomic Edge course.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks so much for that partnership. I'm really excited to offer that to those who purchase the Genomic Edge. I think, just to kind of explain how that works, if someone is listening in. So when you get your DNA blueprint, you will also then be able to plug that into the GeneFit app. So there's no additional cost associated with that. And then you'll have that 3-month subscription for free. So essentially you get to try out, how well your body's recovering, while you're also implementing some of the recommendations that I'm giving in the Genomic Edge. So it really is such a neat partnership. And so I appreciate that extension of that 3-month subscription. And I hope that people will enjoy it and appreciate the data that they're getting and feedback, and continue on with you guys. But yeah, to find me, my private practice is called Root and Fruit Nutrition, and I'm out of Indianapolis, Indiana, but I do a lot of things remotely. So you can find me at my website, www.rootandfruitnutrition.com. And then anything related to the Genomic Edge is right there on the website. You can see the list of professional athletes that I sponsor there as well. And then I'm on Instagram with the, at Root and Fruit Nutrition as well. And then I have a Facebook business page, Root and Fruit Nutrition. So everything Root and Fruit Nutrition.
Brilliant. And we will also put all that information in the show notes. So if you missed any of that, always refer back to the show notes and get the details there, as well as the details of that promo for the Genomic Edge course. Look forward to empowering our athletes out there. And when we talk about athletes, it's not just the big ones, but anybody out there who is interested in exercise, activity, sports performance. So Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really interesting chatting to you. You've got a boatload of information that you can offer to clients and sports people alike. I just wish you all the best with your Genomic Edge course, and I'm sure it's going to be a great success. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I wanted to mention too, I have a special 10% off code for anyone who listens to the podcast and is interested in doing the Genomic Edge. 10% off with the code GeneFit. And then as a result of that, you can also get that 3-month subscription. So it's like a double bonus.
Yay. Okay, so check it out in the show notes, and Until next time with our next exciting guest, thanks so much for listening in, and we'll chat soon. Cheers for now.